Hello and good evening to everyone. This Tuesday evening, September 30th. Thank you for joining me on this topic that I think can be on a lot of people's minds, which is from shakes to whole foods. Essentially, transitioning from drinking the meal replacement shakes to whole foods. And you may be asking yourself, how can I make that leap without losing progress? And hopefully this presentation can get you started down that path. And if you need more personalization, I or some of the staff at Premier Weight Loss, I'm sure would be happy to help. I'm Laura Goldman. I am the dietitian working with Premier Weight Loss, and I'm pleased to speak with you this evening. And as I like to share every single week, and this week I think it really stands out, remember, it's the quality of your calories that matter. And when we're talking about making a switch from a meal replacement shake, no doubt we're wanting to maintain the health progress we've done while we've been losing weight. And we want to make sure that we're switching to quality options rather than feeling as though we are backtracking. So let's see how we can aim for that. What we're going to cover briefly is the utility of those meal replacement drinks, why moving to quote unquote real food may be beneficial. And for some people, they may not want to move to real food. And there are times where that is okay as well. I'll also talk about some strategies for reintroducing those foods. So you're sort of getting your toes wet and easing yourself into that. And as always, reminding you how to prioritize the quote unquote right foods, or knowing what to pick and have in mind whenever you are trying to replace those meal replacements. I also touch on some pitfalls that people may approach, so some things to watch out for and maybe how to avoid falling into those. And of course, if anybody has some questions at the end, that will be your time to shine. So at the end, feel free to reach out by hitting that little question button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll be happy to answer your questions as they come in. Firstly, let's talk about meal replacement shakes and what we mean by that, because that is different than protein drinks, which many people know about protein drinks. You get that scoop, you put it in maybe some water, shake it up, and there you go. But even though the protein drinks may have a similar calorie profile, I say here the meal replacements are about 150 to 400 calories, give or take. One of the big differences is the balance of your macronutrients. So those carbohydrates, protein, fats, those macronutrients may not quite exist. Maybe you will have some protein, some fat, maybe you'll have just protein. It's not all that balanced because in a protein shake, the real focus is on the protein. Also, meal replacement drinks should contain vitamins and minerals. We're talking almost like a multivitamin list sometimes. And the reason why is because many of those can be used as sole source. So what I mean by sole source is, to briefly mention my background, I used to work with people who were tube fed. Essentially, they had to be fed through a tube into their body. They were unable to eat for whatever reason. And so they needed bottled liquid formulas in order to exist. And so in order to do that, they have to be nutritionally complete. They have to meet those requirements. And so these meal replacement shakes, many of them, especially some of the newer ones out there, can be used as a sole source of nutrition, which means you're not missing out on too much. But that doesn't apply to all of them. And also, well, we'll sort of touch on this in a little bit, but also sometimes there are concerns about, well, does it have enough fiber though? Or do I have to go get that from somewhere else? And some of the more original meal replacements or sole sources of nutrition may use a lot of high fructose corn syrup. And perhaps that's something you're trying to avoid, and avoid added sugars as much as possible. So just so you're aware of what meal replacements count as, and also that there are quite a variety of them out there. So the good, and if you're using them, you probably know that convenience is a huge factor. They're ready to go. they're shelf stable. Also the portions are under control. You've got a bottle and you're done. You know what you're getting. And because of that, you can feel more confident about whatever it is you're drinking for, say, lunch, dinner, or breakfast. And you don't have that meal planning fatigue of having to think, what am I going to make today? What are my options? You don't have to worry about it. You've already got your answer and you can rest easy. And that's nice. That's very nice to have. And nowadays, most dietitians will agree that meal replacement shakes have their purpose and are valid for people who are looking to lose weight. And to remove that extra stress is very important. So that is the good. But the not so good that may be out there, especially if you feel reliant on them, which is part of it. If you feel like you can't move from drinking these shakes, that might be a problem for you, depending. Because first and foremost, there is a lack of variety. And I don't necessarily mean that you have to have a variety of meal replacement shakes in order to make sure you're being properly nourished. Depending on the shake, you might be, but maybe you're bored. Maybe you want to taste something that isn't liquid or that isn't vanilla or chocolate, and you enjoy food and would like to have that option again. Also, I put here lack of beneficial nutrients or phytochemicals from whole foods. That one, again, it does depend because there are some formulas out there that do use whole foods or aim for getting some phytonutrients in there. However, some of them can fall short on fiber. Some of them may not have those whole foods and be a bit more processed, and that may be something you wish to avoid. So it does depend, but that can be a problem too. One that I know would affect me greatly is that paralysis when dining out, or perhaps even choosing to not go to a party or a social situation because you are stuck in this moment of, well, I can only drink my shake, so maybe I don't want to go because I'll be embarrassed or I won't know what to pick and then I'll just fall off the rails. And that can be a very unpleasant feeling because if you feel like you cannot go out and enjoy your social activities, that may feel very isolating. And then at the very end, the sort of overarching of, well, if I choose something else, I don't know how many calories are in it. I don't know if I've chosen the right option. I've failed, and now all the progress I've made is going to be undone. And I know many of us understand that one meal is not going to be what ends it, but I can understand that sentiment. And so that is also perhaps not the great, not the best if you are feeling reliant on these shakes. So let's talk about phasing those out. If we're trying to get away from that not so good, then let's talk about how we can address that without losing that progress. So if you decide that you want to start this week or maybe next week, for those first 2 weeks, I would challenge you to think about what are the meals that are the easiest for me. So if you are drinking a meal replacement for breakfast and you figure that breakfast is probably the easiest meal, most people are not preparing massive amounts, then maybe that's the one you want to replace. But perhaps not. Perhaps you are drinking a meal replacement later in the day, or you maybe pack your lunches ahead of time. Find out which one you feel like you would have the easiest time making an adjustment. And also, as I put here, think about when you have the most energy. So that means if you have to prepare something or get something packed up that you didn't have to previously, when do you have the energy to do that? If you can meal prep and have it ahead of time over a weekend and ready to go for the week, great. But don't make yourself, if you're feeling exhausted first thing in the morning and the most you can do is grab a bottle, maybe that's not the time to start making, maybe that's not the time of day to make that change. Or if you only have the breakfast you need to replace, then find out when you have the energy to pre-prepare your breakfast. For example, I usually eat yogurt and berries every morning. And so if I'm going to go to a gym early in the morning, then I will have already the container of yogurt and berries packed up the night before, ready to go. And then I can take it with me in the morning. So I won't have to worry about making anything that morning and allow myself a few extra minutes of sleep. I do mention here, though, under the first 2 weeks, keep those meal replacements handy. Don't throw them out. You need to have that backup parachute because you may have an off day. You may not be feeling well or dealing with other situations. That's okay. If you can only replace your meals or replace those drinks 3 times in a week, that's fine. That's more than where we were. So just keep that in mind. Going for the weeks 3+, if you were doing 2 meal replacements in a day, start thinking about replacing that second shake if you want to. And as we start working on that, which I'll talk about some ideas for replacements here in a little bit, then getting that started will help you continue toward that progress. And I'm not, as you might notice, I've not said achieving being completely meal replacement free. It's always a process. It's always working toward the goal of lessening it, maybe not even getting rid of it completely. It just depends on where you are. And as I said here, keep your shakes available for days when convenience is needed. We've all had those very, very busy days. And if that is an easy thing for you to have on hand, keep it available. And my little tip here is when we're talking about recipes or changing into real foods, keep it simple. We're not looking to earn a Michelin star here. If you have your one pot crock pot meals or Greek yogurt parfaits, if there's an egg scramble, just make sure that you're looking for something that's protein forward and minimal prep time. So we don't have to be fancy. Go with those simple recipes. Now, when we're talking about some whole foods to reintroduce, I wanted to give you a list of items that are important. So where there's the priorities, of course, but also some that are generally easy to get a hold of. So for protein, the number one, which you might even be tired of hearing about, are eggs. They're easy to find. You can boil them. You can prepare them in various ways, and they're readily available and fairly portable, especially if they're boiled. But also Greek yogurt, lean meats, of course, as well as legumes or tofu if you are vegetarian or vegan. Also, legumes, if you've been to one of the premier weight loss clinics, you may have seen that there are some edamame packs that are high in protein, but really, truly a delicious snack as well. And that can count for some of it. It's a small snack, but it can still count. Also, we want to look at fiber because that can help with your feelings of fullness and satiety if that's ever an issue, although many people do feel satiety when taking GLP-1 food or medications, so just depends on you, but also overall gut health. And as I mentioned, there are many meal replacements where the fiber is sorely lacking, so this is an area that is important to focus on. And where you can find that, of course, are your non-starchy vegetables, your broccoli, cauliflowers, lettuces, leafy greens, also your berries. Most berries are very high in fiber, pears, and fruit with skin. Beans and lentils are more on the veggie legume side, and then moderate amounts of whole grains. Moving on to satiety foods, in case you are concerned about feeling like you might get hungry. Then again, think about fiber. I mentioned a few other fiber-containing foods there, but also healthy fats. So you can incorporate an avocado in some of your meals, salads, or sandwiches, nuts and olive oils. And something that tends to be underappreciated is the value of hydration. So staying hydrated is very helpful in making sure that you're properly nourished, having gut health go on, and overall general health. I figured it would be helpful to offer a sample menu idea. So we're looking here, you can see breakfast. They took a note from me, essentially. I typically don't add almond butter, but that is a nice way to add in even more protein. So Greek yogurt plus some berries. Then almond butter for a little texture and a little protein and fat, as well as chia seeds for, again, some healthy fats, some fiber, and a little bit of protein. Lunch, Here it says large salad, but really let that be dependent on what you are feeling. It doesn't have to be large. It could be a side salad if that's the portion that's working for you. But we were talking about 4 ounces of grilled chicken. You could also do any other type of protein, as well as a half cup of chickpeas and vinaigrette or oil and vinegar. Finally, for dinner, one example here is salmon, but you can again make that your meat protein of choice, just as long as it's grilled or roasted, not covered in sauces. Then some roasted vegetables and maybe a small, and I do mean small, so maybe a quarter of a sweet potato for that starchy vegetable, but a complex carbohydrate there. So those are generally fairly simple. These are not full of sauces and multiple ingredients. Find the recipe or the preparation technique that works best for you, and you can sort of model it from here. I did want to touch on the pitfalls to avoid because I think this is where many of us can feel a bit caught up and unsure where to go. First of all, is that all or nothing mindset that many of us get for all kinds of things in our lives when we're trying to make a change. And so there's a chance that you're trying to go away from these meal replacement shakes, but then you break down one day and now you're thinking, well, I failed. Obviously, I can't do it. But as you heard me mention before, it's okay to have those shakes for the days you need it. Or if you're having an off day, you can allow yourself that. We know it works for you. And so allow yourself that flexibility, but also know that you can just get right back on the proverbial horse. Secondly, and one that even I find myself in, as somebody who talks about food all day, I sometimes will come up with that writer's block of figuring out my own dinners. And that's being overwhelmed by planning meals. So I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed, of course. And so one way that you can do that is just start by finding one meal that you like. I think at one time I mentioned in a previous webinar the theme of Taco Tuesday. If you like tacos and you know of a healthy way to put those together, then that can be your Tuesday. And now you've replaced one of those meals. And you can pack that up and have it ready for a lunch if lunch is where you were having those meal replacement drinks. And build off of that. It's okay to have those in your weekly rotation. And so if you found 1 to 3 meals that you know are easy, healthy, can make ahead of time, then there you go. You've got your meals planned ahead. Something I find easy to forget is, what if we start to ignore the medication's effects? So if you have been drinking that drink and you know that you feel in control and you know what to expect with protein and calories, I think sometimes the transition to eating off of a plate or eating from a bowl may be difficult because you might feel like you have to go back to the normal portion size. And one, your appetite may be suppressed and that may make you uncomfortable. Or you may not have such a suppressed appetite, but because it's there and because old habits die hard, you may still end up feeling like you have to eat that full portion when it's actually not necessary. So take time to check in with yourself as you're eating to make sure that you are not trying to overfill or clean the plate. Another pitfall, and this is the one where I know there can be that fearful of social situations, is avoiding them. You don't want to avoid altogether. And so be aware that restaurants can work for you. Check out those menus ahead of time. Eat only half or share your portions. You can also have half of it boxed up for later. It's always better to go in with the idea of, I'm going to just box up half straight away. And as long as you know what to expect at those menus ahead of time, you can pre-plan and make sure that you're going to order something that works for you. And perfectionism. So this is also one that I think many people struggle with, in that if you're going to make this change, then we've got to have the whole week figured out. We got to be ready to go and we got to be perfect the whole way through. And I think sometimes that can be very difficult, because if you can figure out a few meals for up to Wednesday, say, and then feel like you don't have anything for the rest of the week, maybe you feel like you're not ready to get started. And that's not fair to you. Allow yourself to implement as many days meal replacement free as best for you. So don't wait to have your whole week figured out. You can take it one day at a time. So if you're watching this and you want to make this change, let's look at the next steps that you can take. So here's sort of an action plan for you in this next week. Take a look at your calendar and pick 1 and up to 3 days, so sort of what works for your busy schedule, where you will replace your shake. So if you see certain days where you know it's just going to be an easier day for you, not your most challenging day where you have tons of meetings or obligations, pick those days where you know it will be, first of all, easy for you, and plan those meals ahead of time. And I mentioned here, it can be the same meal. You were having the same shake, so why not a same meal? I have, like I said before, yogurt and berries every morning. And so if you like that for your breakfast and want that, then have those 1 to 3 days be yogurt and berries. There's no need to have something completely different every single day. Also, something that's important is to check in with yourself. I think sometimes we just focus on the scale and think about, well, as long as I'm losing weight, we're doing well. But ask yourself also, how do I feel? Are you feeling more confident? Are you feeling as though you might be more full or happier or energetic with these different changes? So check in with yourself to see how overall you're feeling with your wellness. And of course, on the opposite end, if you're feeling more anxious while trying to make these changes, that's okay too. Maybe you need to take a break and allow yourself some meal replacements for a day or a few days. And as I've sort of emphasized a few times, don't expect complete change all at once. This may be a work in progress, and it could be weeks, it could even be months, because completely overhauling something that has been a habit of yours for quite some time, perhaps, is not going to change overnight. And keep those emergency meal replacements on hand, because if you don't have them and you feel like you don't have any good options, then you very well may choose something that's not quite as healthy, not quite as complete, but it's just there. So keep those emergency meal replacements on hand, because you may just need a day off from thinking about it. So to quickly wrap it up and put it together, just know that meal replacement shakes have their place in your weight loss journey. They're there for a reason, and the quality of them have been increasing over time, where you are getting some that even contain whole real foods. So it's okay that you're using those. They are a good product to have available. But transitioning to real foods may offer many benefits. If you've been bored, that can help relieve that. It can offer you some more variety, and there may be some nutritional benefits depending on what you may be drinking. But remember and give yourself grace to take time to make this transition to real foods. We don't have to, again, do all of it at once, and the portions don't have to be back to the sizes that you may have been familiar with. So smaller portions, 1 day at a time, that's okay. And now is the time where I would leave that to questions. And of course, this was a very broad general discussion. So if there are specific questions, maybe you have questions about your meal replacement that you've chosen, or some other ideas that you would like to have for breakfasts or lunches, maybe dinners, by all means, this is the time to ask, or you can ask the staff of Premier Weight Loss. They can get you in touch with me, where we can talk about a more individualized approach. But if you have any questions that are right now, I will wait here and be happy to answer them. All right, well, I think that will do it. So I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their week. And if there's anything that you need, by all means, reach out to myself or the Premier Weight Loss staff. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.